Many years ago, I had a close friend diagnosed with a virulent cancer that would eventually take his life. And at the time of his diagnosis, he was given 12 to 18 months to live. He knew there was almost no chance of survival. He had two small children. So he packed as much parenting as possible into the 18, 19 months that he lived. He was always reading books about the issues that his children would face in life. He had no fears about death for himself. He was very comfortable with his relationship with God. That wasn't a concern. But he really worked to trust God with his kids. And I remember a few weeks before he died, he gave me a book to read about a young man and his father and their relationship through a very difficult addiction to crystal meth. It took us to that place where his son's life just spiraled out of control into the depth and darkness of this addiction to meth. Son in the book goes to treatment a number of times, but this force of addiction is so powerful that nothing really seems to work for his son. At the real low point of the book, the father is called from a hospital on the East Coast and informed that his son is in the hospital in intensive care and is probably not going to make it. That he is in full-blown overdose mode. His body is trying to shut down in every imaginable way, and they just don't think he's going to make it. And arrives there as soon as possible. And his son rallies and begins to heal, and his strength is restored and his systems rebound. And as soon as the son is able, he checks himself out of the hospital and disappears into the world of addiction once again. And this book is the telling of this dynamic sort of cycling over and over. Each time the father races to be near the son, to be present, to pray, to hope, just on the chance that something might change, but knowing it might not change. Now, the book ends on a high note. There's a happy ending, but it's a somber happy ending. The son finds his way into recovery, but the family is perfectly clear, that in terms of recovery, they only have the moments they have, and that at any time, their son could be consumed by addiction and disappear like he has 1,000 times before. But they know, the father knows, that those moments that he has are valuable. That the moments that he has are worth everything. And while he can't control the future, he can't control his son, he can't control any of it, he can be present. The father can only love the son. Nothing more. The father can only love the son. It seems to me this parable of the prodigal son that we just heard is not that much different than the story I just told you. Except the parable of the prodigal is somewhat worse. You see, the the younger son, the prodigal in the tale, approaches his father and asks for what will be his when his father is dead. He essentially says to him, "Dad, I really wish you were dead now. So give me what I will have when you are dead." The property in the story is land, which in first century Palestine is incredibly important. You just don't part with land. You don't sell land out of a family. It exists in a family from generation to generation. So the son takes the land and sells it outside of the family. This was not only spitting in the father's face, it was spitting in the family's face. It was unbelievable for the first hearers of this parable to imagine a son making these requests, but equally unimaginable that a father would do this, that a father would grant this freedom and latitude to this younger son. Now, we interpret this story as good son, bad son, but we have to remember why Jesus is telling the story. Those first couple lines of the gospel lesson, the Pharisees and the temple officials are upset because sinners, the unclean, are going to Jesus in droves, seeking the health and wholeness that he offers. And they don't really care for this very much. They've been following all the rules. Law-bound. They're entitled to the grace of God. They deserve God's attention and mercy. How could God pay attention to anyone else? So Jesus tells them this parable to remind them that it's not about earning anything, to remind them that this isn't about being good or being bad, being deserving or being jealous. This is a story about the capacity that God has for love. This is a story about the fact that God will allow us to spit in his face, to run from him as fast as we can. That God, full of grace and mercy, will not let our rejection or our running stand in the way of sharing grace and love and mercy and truth and health and wholeness with. Now, in the first century, the patriarch of a family doesn't run for anyone. In the first century, the patriarch of a family has people run to him. And when they arrive, they come to him on bended knee. This is a father better than any first century father in existence. Ready to drop all protocol, all societal, cultural convention, and race to his son to love him, to hold him, and receive him, not because he deserves it, but because that is the Father's nature. We gather this day remembering the nature of God, recognizing that our response to that nature is to try to practice that kind of love in our midst, in our community. That our response to the love of God is to see each other as sisters and brothers and offer that kind of love to one another, even though we don't deserve it. Point of this day, point of this parable, the point of the whole gospel of Jesus Christ is that God loves you and is ready to receive you, even ready to come after you.